Welcome to the Amador Fire Can Report, your go-to source for the latest updates, insights, and stories from Amador Fire. Serving over 500 square miles from the vineyards in the valley to the snow-capped Sierras, our combination department staffs 9 stations and puts 6 engines on the road every single day. Backed by a team of dedicated professionals and more than 30 committed volunteers, we're here to protect, serve, and engage with our community. From fire safety tips to behind-the-scenes action, we're here to keep you informed. I'm your host, Kayla Dale, Public Information Officer for Amador Fire, and in this episode, I'm sitting down with 2 of our volunteer firefighters to explore their journey into the volunteer program, how they got started, and what motivates them to serve, and how they balance the demands of fire service with careers, family, and everyday life. Their stories offer a powerful glimpse into the heart of what it means to be a volunteer in the Amador Fire Protection District. Well, welcome to episode 4 of the Amador Fire Can Report. Today, I'm sitting down with 2 of our dedicated volunteer firefighters from Fiddletown Station 123, firefighter Doug Hill and firefighter Steve Hillstead. They're here representing the many men and women who serve our communities through the Amador Fire Volunteer Program. And before we dive in, I want to take a moment to highlight that Amador Fire is a combination department made up of both career personnel and more than 30 active volunteers. This hybrid model strengthens our ability to serve the community. And we're incredibly proud of the work and the commitment that our volunteer firefighters bring to the table every single day. In this episode, we're going to talk about what it means to be a volunteer firefighter with Amador Fire, hear about Doug and Steve's journeys in the fire service, and get a firsthand look at what motivates individuals to serve in this capacity. So with that said, let's get started. Firefighter Hill, I think I want to start with you. Can you give us a brief background on your career and how you came to join Amador Fire as a volunteer?
Sure, Kayla, thanks. Boy, we moved up to Amador County about 12, 13 years ago. Subsequently, about 6 years ago, I semi-retired as a CEO of industry in the Silicon Valley with a mechanical engineering degree. So I very much enjoy being outdoors in the foothills and in a smaller community as opposed to the Bay Area.
And I'd have to believe that's quite the change there. So let me ask, how did you find out about Amador Fire?
Gosh, I think it was about Christmas time, and I got a letter from the chief.
Yeah.
And I thought, what's the fire chief sending me a letter for? It was addressed to me personally. So, of course, I opened it up, and right away I thought, well, this is weird. He's searching for volunteers. And just out of curiosity, and of course, this is on the back of the Caldor fire just a couple years before, right? So we're already trying to be fire wise. We live on hundreds of acres, so we're cognizant. We're doing a lot of our own fire abatement, a lot of work on the farm. Nonetheless, I call the chief, have a relatively lengthy conversation with him. And by the end of the conversation, he had inspired me to come to a introductory meeting. Really, he made it clear that the community needed us.
Mm-hmm.
Fiddletown specifically needed us.
Mm-hmm.
So I got excited about it and went to my first meeting.
Yeah, and I remember how much we truly needed volunteers in the Fiddletown area at that time. So hearing how that message really resonated with you is really meaningful. So firefighter Hillstead, I'd love for you to share a bit about your own path. What brought you to Amador Fire and how you found your way into volunteering with us here?
Okay, thanks, Kayla. It's great to be here. I was a couple different hats I wore over the years. I was in the airline industry for 23 years, and I retired from that, and then went into the fertilizer industry for about 15 years or so, I guess it was. And about 6 years ago, retired, and have been up here full time since then. The first day we bought the property, the day we took possession of our property, literally like a half hour after we were, okay, it's all ours, and we took our pictures and did all that, 2 of my neighbors rolled up the driveway and introduced themselves. And turns out he was a volunteer firefighter. And he kind of planted the seed in me. He said, yeah, I'm a volunteer firefighter. And I was like, why do you do that? And he said, well, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And that just kind of stuck with me. And it really at that time wasn't my plan to do it. And then fast forward, meeting Doug, and he's my neighbor now, became good friends with him and all that. And he was already going down the road to become a volunteer firefighter. And I was like, man, I want to do this. I had some back issues and I couldn't do it at that time. I got those taken care of. And that kind of was what drove me and got me started, I guess, in wanting to do it.
Yeah. We have used many different methods to recruit volunteers across the district, mailers being one of them. But honestly, the most effective tool by far has been social media and good old fashioned word of mouth. When our volunteers start sharing their experiences and bringing others, that kind of organic connection really works, I think. People start to realize, hey, I can actually do this. I can volunteer. I can serve my community and still manage my job, school, my family life. And I think that's the real power behind our program. So let's go back to you, Firefighter Hill. Walk me through your first few weeks as a volunteer. I know you mentioned that initial meeting. Do you want to start there or do you want to go back to the academy days?
I think what's real important here is that when I first went to that first meeting, I met a lot of the great people. And real quickly, I learned that we were there for one reason: is if we can be here, we should. We really should. The community needs us. It's our opportunity to give back. And that immediately became a common bond with those in the academy. And of course, second or third night, you get your training manuals, and there's 12 or 1,300 pages of the fire training manual, and then there's another 300 of your EMR AMS that's coming up, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm back in college. How am I going to manage this? So it's daunting. It's daunting. Chief makes it very clear from the beginning that hey, you're going to be exposed to dangers. You can do some good, and we're gonna teach you how to deal with real life situations and make a difference in the community. So for me, it's really rewarding.
Absolutely. And one thing that really stands out about Amador Fire is the variety of opportunities that our volunteers get to be a part of and involved in, whether it's hands on training, running calls, assisting with prescribed burns, or stepping up for community events. You all wear a lot of hats. And yes, I know we're always asking for help for those community events, but there's a reason for that. Like I've said in almost every episode so far, we are here for the community, whether it's an educational outreach, a town hall, a meet and greet. Those moments matter. And in areas like Fiddletown, those efforts have really made a difference thanks to dedicated volunteers like yourselves. So, Firefighter Hill said, let's talk about your onboarding and academy experience. I've seen you during our last couple Wednesday night trainings and various other sessions we've all been a part of. What's it been like going through that process and putting it all into practice now?
Yeah, definitely. I like the refresher. I'm the type of person, I play scenarios out in my head constantly, whether I'm driving down the road or working on a project around the house. And I like to have that constant reminder, okay, if this happens, the what ifs, and play that out in my head. And it has been a refresher for me with the EMR, joining you guys in this current academy, volunteer academy that's going on right now. With my person, when I went to my first meeting the first night, I was terrified. I walked into 122 and I'm like, oh my God, all these, the room was packed and I was very nervous. And Chief did quick introductions and then pulled me out and kind of just did a quick interview with me and asked me, why I wanted to do it or what, my background was and all that. And made me feel very comfortable right out of the gate. I think that was probably the biggest thing. He's got a rule that I can't repeat on the air, but his rule to me really applies. So I think that the comfort level that he instilled in me at that point made me feel really good that I was doing the right thing and that what I wanted to do, what I felt like I could contribute was going to be of value because I am older. I'm not a young. This is a young man's sport, if you want to call it that. And here I'm pushing 60, and I try to keep myself in really good shape and exercise very regularly, and even more so now. This kind of drove me last year when, I was committed to doing the academy. I started really pounding it out every single day and getting my cardio up and all that. And not that that's necessary. I think you could easily get by, but there's a lot of volunteer events that we have that aren't required to be physical, and I think that's what's really cool is that you can kind of pick and choose what you do. If you want to be the one that's, doing the physical part, you can. If you want to just do the events, you can. You can kind of mix and match. And I think for me, it kind of took the pressure off and it's kind of made me want to do stuff just because there was no pressure. I knew that was something I could easily handle and do. And I think anybody else that's on the, that's out there looking at us thinking that whether or not they want to be a volunteer or not, it's like, yeah, there's something for everybody.
Yeah. And you mentioned your initial meeting with Chief, and that's something that's been consistent since day one with him. From the very first potential volunteer he ever met with as the fire chief with Amador Fire to the individuals that he spoke with just as early as yesterday morning, Chief Withrow has always prioritized a one-on-one conversation with these people. He lays out his expectations. It's very clear, but just as importantly, he takes this time to listen to them. It's not just about finding that right fit for Amador Fire. It's about making sure that it's the right fit for that individual also. I really respect that he makes the effort to personally represent the department in those conversations. I think it just sets a tone that we're not just bringing anybody on board. We're bringing on people who understand what's expected and feel confident that it's a good match for them. And, at the end of the day, we don't want to waste anybody's time and we don't want our time wasted. So that's the priority of those conversations.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more.
Both of you have touched on your careers, your families, and everything else that's going on in busy lives. But I'd like to take a moment to just deep dive into the topic of responsibilities. As volunteers, you're committed to regular Wednesday night trainings, typically 2 hours each week, along with additional drills, community events, and of course, your personal and professional lives. That's a lot to manage. So let's talk about how you find that balance. Firefighter Hill, walk me through what that looks like for you. How do you juggle these different commitments while continuing to serve your community?
Yeah, Kayla, we were talking about some of our volunteer firefighters still have full-time jobs, and yet they're still exhibiting fruitful careers as volunteer firefighters. Several of them from Fiddletown specifically, and we know when they're out of town, when they're unavailable, because we communicate on that text thread that we spoke of earlier. But as a volunteer firefighter, Amador accommodates that, right? And the good news is we do have 5 or 6 guys that are available up in our area, in our sector, and so it can work if you're still working full time.
I think when I first thought or was introduced to the volunteer concept or the idea of it, I thought, oh my God, that's going to be more time than I have. I don't have the time to volunteer as a firefighter. There's no way I have the time. I do have the time. And I think it's not the time requirement that I had originally thought. It's a lot less. It can be as much as I want it to be. I mean, it could be all the time, whatever. It can also be as little. Like Doug was saying, there's a couple guys that have full-time jobs, and yeah, they're not on every call, but they're there. They're there when they can be, and I think that's the thing. And then there's also the community events. We volunteer for the fair and for the Santa Claus driving around, and there's multiple different volunteer things to do that you can do on a Saturday when you're not working. And if that's all you can do now, that's fine. But at least your foot's in the door. You've gotten the training. You've got the equipment. You're maybe you're not using it all the time, but fast forward it 1, 2, 3 years down the road, and you're still involved and still into it. Now you've retired, and now you're ready to do this on a regular basis like we are. And the community needs it. And if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
Right.
And if even up in Fiddletown, any call we get, it's 9 to 12 minutes response from Plymouth. And if we're up there and we can get down there in a few minutes ahead, maybe we can't mitigate the entire event, but we can slow it down. And if say it's a fire start, maybe we can't put it out, but we can slow it enough till the CAV can get there and they can knock it down. If we weren't there, by the time they got there, it's out of control.
Mm-hmm.
So if we get to do that once or twice, it's worth it to me. If we can do it a dozen times, even better.
Yeah.
And the time requirement is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's actually quite a bit less.
Yeah, and that made me think of 2 things. One, the heavy lift of the academy. Let's just say we have an academy going right now, and Saturday will be their last day, and they've been going since January. And when we're writing out the schedule and we're attending on Saturdays to help with training, it seems like, oh my gosh, we're doing this for 4 months. But I've been going for the last few Saturdays to train, to present, to just be present, and it's like we only have 1 Saturday left. The year's half over almost, and it goes by fast. But also the training that you're getting, you're not just using when you're responding to calls. You're an EMR now. You know how to do basic medical life-saving measures, and you can use that on vacation or at home or whatever that looks like. And I think that that's important for people to remember as listeners who are thinking about being a volunteer, is you're learning stuff that you can use every single day of your life.
Invaluable.
I think one of our members, Joe, was driving on his, a day off of his real job, and he wasn't in AFPD mode, and there was an accident, and he was literally first on and was holding someone's C-spine until the paramedics got there.
Right.
And he probably wouldn't have been able to do that had he not had this training. So selfishly, living up where we live in the remote area of Fiddletown up there in the hills, having this in your back pocket is not a bad thing.
No, absolutely.
For learning the fire behavior, for learning, okay, I see smoke coming. I see this. Well, 5 or 6 years ago, I see a puff of smoke. I panic. Mm-hmm. Now I see, okay, what's the wind direction? What's the wind speed? What's the relative humidity going on right now? I've got those tools in my back pocket to analyze a smoke plume that's a couple miles away and not panic today. Flip side is, my wife gets injured, has a cut, a major bleeding event, or even a family member for that matter. I've got the skills to take care of that.
Yeah.
And maybe I can't do it all, but I can do enough to where I can keep her alive until the paramedics can get there, depending on what it is.
It's interesting sometimes, and it is a balancing act. As a volunteer, we're not assigned to shifts like A, B, or C, like the full-time firefighters are.
Mm-hmm.
So we always feel we're on all the time. If we're in the county, if we're at home, we're monitoring radios. We're watching the drawdown or other stations being drawn down. Should we be ready to go? Sometimes it's text messaging in our station group, right? So yeah, it is a little tricky to balance, but I think when you make the commitment and you know that Wednesday nights are your dedicated training, you do your darndest to get there. And yeah, there's times you can't, and life does happen. Of course, you're out on calls inadvertently. You don't know when those are coming. 3:00 in the morning, whenever. So it's important you have the support of your family and your friends and those that surround you.
Yeah, it's the scheduling of it. You're always on. And that's kind of how I approach it. It's 24/7. Now, there's a lot of times calls come through and I miss them. I'm in the shower or I'm just, living life. It's just because we are 24/7. We don't have a 48 on, 96 off type of schedule. I like that challenge and I like the to know that, okay, at any moment it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always personally watching it really closely as we see it draw down. It's like, okay, there's times when I've even just gotten dressed, throw my uniform on because it's like we're getting thin right now, and it's any second if anything happens, it's us, and it's a little nerve wracking. And I think it kind of puts a little adrenaline rush, I guess, I get off of it. To be ready to go, and because you don't know what you're going to do. It can be any number of things. You kind of have a general idea. It's going to be one of a fire, it's an accident, it's a medical, whatever. But you don't know, and until you're rolling. And as I'm rolling, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going. I know what the call is. There's a fire. Let's just say, it's like, okay, this can happen, that can happen, and try and anticipate some of the problems or whatever that could pop up as I'm driving to the station. One lesson I learned really fast was that it's not my emergency. I didn't cause it. And I don't need to race and be dangerous to get to the station. I can not take my time. I'm not going down to pick petunias, but I need to be aggressive, but not ridiculous. And if I don't get there, then nothing's going to happen. So that became a real priority in my mind, I guess. And I didn't realize it, but my wife said after a couple of months of being part of this, she goes, "You drive differently now. Just when we go to the store or whatever, you drive differently." And I didn't think about that, but I think it is. You take a step back and you kind of go, okay, you know what? If I drive too crazy right now, I'm going to get there 30 seconds faster, or I'm going to be there 3 hours late because of, an accident or whatever.
Yeah, no, those are great points. I think something that we've seen time and time again, especially just in the last couple months, is when we have major incidents going down in the county or multiple incidents. For example, a couple weeks ago, we had a pretty crazy snowstorm up country, and we had 5 engines, assigned up within a 2-mile radius. And so we relied on our volunteers to backfill all those stations, to move around and staff. And I say this is powerful because it is. We heard you guys just coming up on the radio while we're responding to these calls, and it just is happening automatically with this well-oiled machine where you guys know exactly what to do. And that just shows your commitment because you're listening to the radio. Yeah. You know what's happening.
And just to speak to the commitment, that came early on, and really, Chief set the tone for that. I mentioned earlier there's A shift, B shift, C shift, and we, as volunteers, we interact with all of them, whether it's through training or calls we're on. And one thing that set the tone for me early on is, I'll be darned if the chief wasn't at almost every training session we had. And back in the academy, that was weekends too. So now we're not just talking Wednesdays, but the weekends. This guy's showing up all the time. And I'm thinking to myself, does he ever get a day off? And then that transcends right down into the company officers and the battalion chiefs as well. They're all uber supportive. They're just incredibly supportive and incredibly committed. And I think that sets the tone for us as volunteers to just mirror that behavior. And for those of us that are lucky to have the opportunity, I think it's just that.
Yeah. I just thought of something with what you said. Last night we were in this building until 9 o'clock at night meeting with our junior firefighters. And instead of doing a training or having them pull a hose or do something fun, we actually just sat at this table and we talked about leadership with them. And so mind you, these are 15, 16-year-old kids that are in our junior firefighter program, which is fairly new. But it was just Chief Withrow and myself. We bought them dinner, bought them cupcakes, and we just talked and asked them, what is a leader in your eyes? What do you want to be? And what do you want to see out of a leader? And I think of that now recording this podcast because to the volunteers, it's the exact same thing. You guys have seen leadership at the highest level, and now it's trickling down into your ranks, and you can be leaders recruiting new volunteers. So I think that's something special about Amador Fire that we really recognize is the leadership component and having the chief there and the buy-in from the volunteers to
100%.
want to support.
100%. I also think the fire service attracts a certain personality. I've made some wonderful new friendships in the last couple of years as a volunteer firefighter. I don't think that you get those relationships without a common bond, a common interest to serve the community, help each other, train each other. And it's common somebody in the department or somebody on the call is deficient at one skill or another, and really quick we help one another. So it really does become a team. I heard another podcast, the BCs talk about how different skill sets get deployed, but it's real all the way down to us as volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Tag on to what Doug said about the chief and his commitment to it. He's always there not always, but majority of the time he pops in on our trainings either in the beginning and gives us a quick briefing or a quick rundown of what's going on or whatever. And with the chief, one of the things I really enjoy is he goes down rabbit holes quite a bit with his stories. But, I had a platoon sergeant in the Army, and I learned more from his stories talking about Vietnam. He was a medic in Vietnam, and I learned more from his stories than I did my actual training. And a lot of times I learned more from the chief's stories because I'll take them home and replay them in my head because it's what I do. And it's like I draw a lot out of that. And I really enjoy that part of him. And showing his dedication to us makes it real easy to be dedicated to him.
Yeah. You both keep sparking thoughts that connect to conversations we've had recently, just like the one last night with the junior firefighters, like I mentioned. And one of the points I tried to really emphasize with them is that certain people are placed in your life for a reason. And it's up to you to recognize what you can learn from those interactions with those people. Whether it's a battalion chief, a captain, a firefighter, or your fire chief, we should say, there's always a takeaway, some lesson or value that can help you grow personally and professionally. And it's not just the fire service, it's teachers, it's coaches, it's mentors. Those experiences shape how we show up in this world. And it doesn't matter how old you are or at what point you are in your life to learn from those lessons. I shared a story with our junior firefighters about my high school softball coach. He was tough, no excuses kind of guy, but that taught me discipline and accountability. And, looking back, those lessons really influenced my work ethic and the way that I approach responsibilities today. And now I see those same life skills being passed down and reinforced through different ranks of this department. And it all has to do with leadership and who's leading your department at all ranks, at all levels, from the firefighters, the volunteers, the captains, and so on. Leadership is the primary reason for all of this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One thing, too, that is kind of interesting, or kind of funny for me anyways, is when I first started doing this, and I showed up on a call and 10 or 15 different people I didn't even know. Hey, man, thank you so much for being here. Thanks we need the water truck, or we know whatever the thing. And I was like, okay, I get it. You're appreciative or whatever, but it's like, then you do something else and 4 or 5 guys, hey, thank you so much, man. Thanks a lot. And it's like, I don't need the thanks, but it is really nice to know that you're appreciated and that what we're doing is worthwhile.
Yeah, there's value.
There's value to it. And especially as we get drawn down in the county and, Doug and I have gone to 122 in Plymouth and covered that station, we're there by ourselves and it's like, wow, we're really doing this. It's like, okay, at any second we can go. Granted, we didn't go, but we're ready to go. And we're trained enough to hopefully mitigate whatever comes our way in an efficient way. And we can respond accordingly. And it's kind of cool to have that ability to be able to do that.
And on that topic, there's no denying that this role as a volunteer firefighter requires a strong support system between late night calls, pagers going off at all hours, and balancing family life. I imagine it's been quite an adjustment here. And I'm just curious, how has that impacted your day-to-day life, and whether you've seen a shift in how people support or respond to you since you've taken on this role as a volunteer firefighter?
It's funny on that. I've got a neighbor who's 91, and I call him Grandpa, and he's not my grandpa, but great guy. And he called me a couple of months ago, and he'd fallen, and he was in the garage, and he'd fallen, and he couldn't get up. And he said, "Hey, can you come over and give me a hand?" I'm like, so I just didn't know what I was doing. And I come over, he's laying on the garage floor. And I said, if you'd have called 911, I'd get paid, they'd pay us a little tiny bit for fuel or whatever. I'd get paid. So he reached into his pocket to pull out some money. And I said, I'm just kidding, but it is neat to know that I do have neighbors that know that I'm doing this, and that I've told them, I said, "Hey, if you got a problem, you call 911 and you call me too." And more than likely, I've got addresses of people that I know really close to me. So if I see that address pop up, I know, oh, that's so-and-so. I'm just going to go straight there. I'm not going to go to the station, and depending on what the call is, of course, but it is kind of neat to be tied to your friends and neighbors as well as the community as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So besides being the oldest guy, the grandkids love Grampy being a firefighter, which is very cool, right?
Yeah.
But I think, Steve, you speak to, in general, the public is grateful. You also mentioned the gratitude from the full-timers when we show up to augment an incident that they're on, whether it's ferrying water to them or fighting fire or cleaning up or helping load patients or whatever. I think that as we became firefighters, we became more knowledgeable in a lot of things. Safety, for one. Steve mentioned earlier, he drives differently. That struck a nerve with me. I do as well. I think a lot of what we do is different. I think a lot of how we view the world now is different from a safety perspective, whether it's your burn piles or, and it might just be interacting with others on the road, whatever it is. It just gives you a different perspective, and that there's a lot of people out there that are vulnerable, and we're ready to go to work and help them if they need it. Right?
Mm-hmm. And I think that ties directly into something we often hear referred to as the brotherhood of the fire service. That sense of connection is really real. I've been in the fire service for 10 years now. I started in an HR and personnel role with the state, where I learned a ton about the operational side. But it really wasn't until I joined Amador Fire that I truly experienced the depth of the family dynamic within the fire service. What really stood out to me was how strong our internal communication and support became, especially during a recent incident that we had. It just reminded me how much our members genuinely look out for one another, and how important that culture of connection is, especially in a volunteer-based system. Guys, I believe that that's a big part of why we're seeing more and more people stepping forward to volunteer. In a world that often feels disconnected, there's something meaningful about showing up to a fire station, working side by side with others, and knowing that your efforts directly serve your community. That human connection is what draws people coming back, and it helps them understand that they have purpose and there's room for their purpose here.
Yeah, which is really great. And you bring up an interesting point, that the brotherhood or sisterhood, as you called it. I find that one of the benefits of being a firefighter. And I said earlier about making some new significant friendships, but these full-timers that we're exposed to on and off because they have rotating shifts, we could be on incidents sometimes a week apart. And you'll show up to another fire or another roadside incident or a medical call at whatever hour of the night or day, and it's like you were just on a call with them 5 minutes ago or 5 hours ago.
Right.
And everything just flows. And of course, that all comes from training, but it is unique and it is something special.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think especially here at Amador Fire, as we continue to grow and our volunteer force grows and everybody connects with each other, it's just a really good movement to see. So it's exciting.
On that note, I think what we have at Fiddletown, and I don't know, some people may not know this, but there's, I think, five or six of us now.
Mm-hmm.
And we're connected with our phones. We have a text set up, and we're constantly communicating back and forth. And then when a call pops up, it's like, okay, I got this, or no, I'm out of county, or, I'm out of, we're communicating really well. But the group that we have, it's really a neat group. And when I came in, I was a year behind most of them, and they welcomed me with open arms.
Yeah.
And I think going forward, I'm looking forward to welcoming in someone. 'Cause I'm the junior guy in the bunch, and I'm looking forward to having new guys at 123 in Middletown. I think it's really a cool thing for our community that this little group that we have is
Yeah.
you can't put a price tag on that,
Yeah.
and it's getting stronger. Each training we do together, each call we go on together, the bond gets tighter and stronger, and it's a neat thing to be a part of.
Absolutely. And that's created because of you guys, welcoming people, for training people, accepting people, and finding what their strengths and weaknesses are and working around that and putting them in the right fit within this role.
Absolutely.
And so this has been a joke on every podcast episode so far. And it's true, I should say. But Chief always says, Fiddletown, people are my people, because I love presenting out there. Every time I go out there, my very first presentation ever I've been here for 6 years, was Fiddletown. And I was so scared. I was technically just an office assistant. I went out there and presented on evacuation preparedness, and thought no big deal. No battalion chiefs were there. None of our engine companies were there. And we had 75 people in the room. It's recorded on YouTube. I've never watched it. But ever since then, it's just like, I feel like I have this connection with Fiddletown, not to sound weird. But there's so many. The point that I'm trying to get at is it's such a tight-knit community out there, to add on to what you were just saying. And, we were just talking before we started recording this, is you have a group of community members, not volunteers, community members, that love organizing and hosting events for you guys. They want to host pancake breakfasts and burger cook-offs at the fire station to highlight and support the volunteers. They've created, they have a monthly newsletter that goes out with 600 plus people on it, and they've created a whole Amador Fire volunteer section for you guys. And I think that really says a lot about how you interact with the community, the service that you provide out there. So that's really, you guys should be really proud of that.
I think we are. Kayla, this is our community, and these people are our neighbors, right? So they're important. And Steve, you might agree. When we do attend a function, we're welcome. There's a lot of gratitude that is expressed, and it feels good. It feels good to know you're providing a service that's important when it's called upon.
Right.
And on occasion, we've been out. So some of our neighbors, if you will, some of our community members, we've been into their homes. We've helped them. And some of it's not always pretty. And it's always a joyous occasion when they come back, or you see them weeks later or months later, and they're doing well. And it's our community.
Yeah. I love that. So to wrap this up, I have just 2 more questions I want to add on to. But before we do that, I think just for people listening who may be on the fence of wanting to volunteer at whatever department they're close to, maybe they're not even in Amador County, walk me through what it looks like. So you're at home and it's a Tuesday and your pager goes off. I just want to get a perspective for the people listening of what that looks like, how you go to the call or how you're responding.
Well, you want to take that one? Well, first off, we use I Am Responding. It comes on our phone. And so if we're within phone service, we're monitoring all the calls in the county. So we're seeing all the dispatches from Camino, and we know what's going on. So it kind of gives us a flavor of how busy the department is. You heard us speak to being drawn down earlier. You being in the department know what that means. A listener may not. And that means when resources are punched out to a call from Plymouth elsewhere, and there's another call in Plymouth, there could be a backup engine. There should be a backup engine on its way to cover for that. But a lot of times that call is going to be, we know it could be coming. So we're kind of on alert. And those happen 24/7, right? And yeah, the pagers go off in the middle of the night. I think some highlights are when I get a personal phone call at 3 a.m. from the chief saying, "Hey, Hill, we need help at the top of the hill at Shake Ridge. Can you get your butt up there right away?" And off we go.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that was a good call actually that night.
Yeah,
because he called me next. He said, "Hey, Chief just called me," and I said, "Okay." It wasn't even a question. I just jumped up and go. I think it's when I hear on the radio or on the scanner, I hear stuff starting to really heat up. Like a few weeks ago, you mentioned the upcountry one happened. It's like, okay, I know the next call that goes is mine, or ours, or one of ours. And if I know one of our other guys is out of town that weekend, or you say, "Hey, I'm not going to be able, I'm out of coverage for the next 8 hours or whatever," It's like, oh, well, it's just me now. And there's been
Right.
a few times when I know I'm the only Fiddletown guy, and that's when I get dressed. It's like, I've got nothing else to do at this particular time of the day or whatever, depending on what it is. I'll throw my boots on. That way it's a couple extra minutes. I can get from my house to the station dressed, ready to go in 7 minutes.
Nice.
And if I can, and that's tough. To 7 minutes is moving, so it's probably more like 8 minutes. But that's still pretty good response time just to go grab a rig and then
Right.
be able to go. I just started driving fairly recently, so I've always was kind of at the mercy of somebody else. I can meet at the station, I can get there, but I couldn't drive anything. And now I'm driving. So, and I recently did the vegetation management up off of 88, where I drove and I drove deep in there with the water tender. And that was kind of a big deal for me to drive that piece of equipment through those roads. And it was not just, driving down I-5. It was some pretty rough terrain. So I feel confident that going forward, this fire season coming up, that I'm going to be ready to really assist this year, more so than I was able to last year.
And you mentioned about your guys' communication, and I do have to just say, I do admire it. You guys are legit with your group texts and always on point with that. It's impressive. I've seen it firsthand more often than not. I am responding to calls with the chief, depending on the time and where we are that day. And there's a number of times where I'm grabbing his phone, texting on behalf of him to you guys to respond or jump on rigs. And you guys are always responsive. You're clear, you're quick, you're supportive. I'm available. Give me 20 minutes, whatever the case may be. And for those listening, I think that that's an important point to understand. There's this misconception as a volunteer sometimes that you have to respond to every single call, be ready to go every single moment. And though we absolutely need the help and want the help, we understand that you have a life and you may not be home at the time of the incident. There's a balance, and we work hard to make space for your commitment and the department and your personal responsibilities.
Sometimes it's tough.
Yeah.
I think most of the volunteers, I know most of them, we forget we're volunteers. We think that this is our job, and that's how we behave. And so, right?
Yeah, no, I
Would you
agree.
say
Yeah,
so?
yeah.
And there's no other way to characterize it. Is we take it that serious.
Yeah. Well, and that just says a lot about you guys, and I think it's the department as a whole, because it's not a burden to you. You wouldn't be doing it if it was a burden, but you are ready to go because you want to go. You want to help your community. And as you mentioned earlier, especially in the Fiddletown area, you guys are a very tight-knit community, and people know that there's responders at that fire station ready to help them when they need it.
Prior to joining AFPD, I would sit up on my little hill above Fiddletown, and I have pretty good views. I can see probably 75% of all the way around, and my neighbors know that. And prior to me even being involved in this, I would sit out because it's the middle of summer. It's hot. I'm not going to work when it's that hot, just because I don't have to. So why bother? I'd sit there and watch for fires. I'd listen to the scanner. And then when something would pop up, people were calling and texting me, hey, can you see that? They would ask me for a smoke check because I can see pretty good. I say, yep, I see the plume. Yep, it's, but this is just to a neighbor. And a few times guys have texted me when there's been stuff happening, and I can see, yeah, I can see it. It's really, it's going, or no, it's going down. It's fine. They've, they need to rush so fast. And so it's kind of neat to go from that in my private life. And then when I migrated into AFPD, to now I've got the scanner, and I've got the different communication devices, pieces of the puzzle, so to speak, that allow me to communicate even better.
Mhm.
And then watch duty is another one too, where a lot of the neighbors used to text me, what do you see? And it's like they don't do that anymore because of watch duty, which I highly recommend anybody listening. That's a great app to have. It's free, and it gives you up to date on what's going on with the fires. It's usually the first thing I do when something big's going. It's like I pop that up just because it's got a good map of it, exactly where it's at.
Absolutely.
All the different tools that I've slowly been accumulating that just make me more efficient in my response and more effective when I do actually
Mhm.
get there.
Well, I want to shift the conversation a bit before we end here and speak directly to those who might be on the fence about volunteering. Maybe they've thought about it and they just aren't quite ready, or aren't quite sure what to expect. We've touched on what it looks like to be a volunteer, but I would love to hear from you guys what you would say to someone who's considering joining their local fire department, whether it's Amador Fire or another agency. Why is it worth it? What makes this experience meaningful enough to take those first steps like you guys did?
I get an overwhelming feeling of gratitude when I know that I've participated in that one fire that we did off Shake Ridge that night. It was valuable for us to be there. We shuttled, I don't know, 4 or 5 different shuttle loads with the water tender. And I got home, I was exhausted, and talked to my wife about it, kind of debriefed with her a little bit. And I sat back in my chair and it was just like the adrenaline just kind of left my body. And I was like, wow, that was intense. It was great. And what I did was worthwhile. I wasn't just showing up, I'll just stand over there and watch. No, it's like, no, they needed us. They needed that water. And I think that feeling for me is what drives me. It keeps me motivated, keeps me wanting to be in shape and be fit, ready to participate, so that I have the stories like the chief tells, yeah, there's that one story, that fire we did back on Shake Ridge or whatever. I have a few of those nuggets now, and I'll be adding more of those nuggets. And I think anybody that is like, oh, I don't know if this is a good fit for me or if I should do this, and you know what, do it, find out. And the beautiful thing is the chief will not have you do anything, or BC is not going to ask you to do anything that you don't feel comfortable doing. If you don't have to be, rushing into the burning building, so to speak. There's a lot of support roles that are needed. There's a lot of elements that that a younger firefighter is going to have to do it, or it could be an older volunteer like me. I could do it for them while they go rushing in. If I could support that, to me, it's worth it.
Yeah.
And I think if you're on the fence, then try it. Try and see if it's a good fit, and if it's not a good fit, then there's no harm, no foul, But chances are, if you're even thinking about it or you're on the fence about it, it's probably going to be a good fit for you. That's just my personal take on it.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. For me, it goes back to the day one. And I remember I was talking to Joe and I asked him about it. And he said, why are you here? And my response was this simple, and it's because it's the right thing to do. And his response mirrored that, right? At one point, when you live in a county like ours, and we have these rural areas, one should realize that help can't be far away. It can be 20 minutes away. It can be 30 minutes away, especially out in the Fiddletown area. So you mentioned earlier, if you didn't do it, who's going to do it, right? So it's kind of like, if you're capable and you think you can do this, you should. Mm-hmm. You just should. The training is invaluable. Your perspective on life, safety, your driving skills, so many things are a benefit. I think this will end up being probably one of the greatest things I've ever done.
Yeah.
And just to tag onto that, one of my probably exciting things for me was I got to drive a fire truck. I mean, how many kids growing up was like, man? So I was doing it, and one of the first times I was driving it, someone waved at me, and I waved back like I was probably on a parade. I did the fancy wave or whatever it is. But that feeling of like, yeah, I'm doing this, and it's a positive thing, and I got to drive a fire truck. That was just pretty cool.
One of my favorite things, I have it saved in my little clips from these podcast episodes, is I think episode 2, I sat down with firefighter Hauser, who's one of our probationary firefighters, and he made the comment the first time he got to ride in a fire engine with us was a religious experience for him. Absolutely. And it just cracked me up because I'm like, I've heard that from so many people. Like, it's
well, cool. There's going to a call in a fire engine, and then over Christmas we did the Santa Claus run. I did that a couple nights. I was the lead vehicle driving that and flipping the sirens and just driving through the different neighborhoods and all that. And it was like, I'm driving a fire truck. This is great. It's so cool. So
now the truth comes out why you do it.
That's right. That's all it means.
It's not about people. It's about the truck.
I was going to ask, has volunteering here and everything that you guys just mentioned changed your perspective on the fire service as a whole?
Yeah, I think for myself, over the years, just being a normal Joe citizen, you take for granted who's at the end of 911, and shortly into the academy, I realized that now we're 911. Yeah. We're those people. Yeah. We're that guy, and it's a big deal.
Yeah.
You take for granted who's on the other end of 911. Mm-hmm. And when you get to participate on the response side, it's very gratifying, especially if you execute. If you're lucky enough to get it right, which we rarely get it all right. If you just get enough of it right that it goes well, it feels really good.
Yeah, I think the training that they've given us and the weekly trainings that we attend, all of that combined gets us to a state where the confidence level is there. And then when we get to actually execute it, and it actually, like Doug says, 3/4 of it works out right or whatever. That's all that matters at the end of the day, is that we don't have to get it perfect, but we get it right enough to where we can hold our own until the full-time guys can come in and back us up. I call it the cavalry. Like I have my very first call that I did was I was the first one to respond, and I responded in my own vehicle. It was an accident between Fiddletown and my house, and I was the first one there. And I had my radio, it was my own personal radio, and I was ready to call in that I was to give my report on the conditions. And I realized I didn't know who I was because I'm in my truck, my Ford. And it's like, so, and I could hear sirens coming. I thought, oh, the calves, they're minutes away. I'll just skip the ROC because I don't know who I am and I didn't want to mess that up. And it wouldn't have done any good because I knew they were already coming. But that was kind of a cool moment. Then I just clicked and said, okay, I don't know who I am, but I'm going to do this. I checked my patients out, and one guy, I had to cut his shirt off of him, and I opened him up. And then by the time I started really getting a good assessment on him, the cavalry arrived and they took over, which was fine. And then I did some vitals on the other patient for a while, filled out some of the paperwork, and then they pulled me off of that and put me on traffic duty, which was good for me, just holding the sign and directing the traffic, which is a valuable thing to do to keep everybody safe so that the full-time people could take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my very first call. And it was pretty cool. When I got home that night, I sat back and it was just like, oh my God, what did I just do? And it really wasn't that bad for me. What I had to do as a volunteer, it was actually perfect.
Well, you covered a lot of ground. It goes right back to what you guys have both mentioned, is there's so many different duties on the scene of, let's just say, a traffic accident that I don't think people realize. We're going from patient assessments to, extricating vehicles or patients.
Your hats on the fly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the more bodies that we have on scene, the faster all that gets done, the more efficiently it gets done. And I think at the end of the day, that's why we love having our volunteer force. I'm a big believer in setting goals, both professionally and personally. And I try to carry that mindset into everything that I do, whether it's for myself or for the department. So to end this episode, I just want to ask you both, do you have any goals you're working toward, whether it's individually or within the department or just in the fire service in general? And what would you like to see moving forward for yourselves?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and there's a lot of things that I would like to do, but I have to be realistic in my age and my physical condition. And, I'm still able to do a lot of the things that but as far as what I want to do, I think really for me, if I can just continue to do what I'm doing and polish my skills and hone them in and have it become, right now I have to really think about what I'm doing because I haven't done it. The repetitions haven't been there. So I got to do this and I've got to do that. And I've got to do that, whatever the steps are. If I can get to a point where all that becomes automatic, and it will get there as I do more reps with it, that to me is pretty cool. Just have that polish to where I know the chief knows that okay, we got Hillstead, we got Hill up there, we got the couple of plumber, and we got all these guys up there, and they know their stuff, and we know that if Fiddletown has a problem or Fiddletown has an incident, and we're punched down in the county, that it's going to be covered. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're there today, but if it can only get better.
Absolutely.
For me, that to me would be my goal, was just to keep working on this. I mean, to me, the Wednesday night trainings, I think I've missed 2 since I've been here. And to me, it's more just, it's partial social and more just to really keep fine tuning what I've been taught and learn. I always want to learn more and more. Mm-hmm. So that's for me anyways.
Yeah, I think I mirror everything you said, Steve. I think you asked what the goal was. I think the goal for me is to maintain your health side for years to come so I could still participate in the fire service, in AFPD, and to increase the level of respect by the full-timers, battalion chiefs, captains, the company officers, like Steve said, so that they know we've got it, especially when we're drawn down, that they don't have to think, hey, it's just the volunteers up there, that nope, those guys got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll have to tell you, it's not when that time happens. That happens now. Like, people think that now, they rely on you guys. And I hear it all the time. And especially I mentioned earlier, it's so powerful to hear on the radios when you guys just automatically head to the station because something's going down. So it's not when you gain that respect, you have that respect. And I think that's really cool.
It's pretty
exciting. You guys have done it. Yeah.
Pretty exciting.
So to wrap up this episode, I just really want to thank you guys. Both of you are 2 of our 30 plus volunteers. So you two are representing the volunteer force for Amador Fire. So I just really appreciate both of your time for sitting down with me and giving a glimpse into what it's like to be a volunteer. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all you do. And I know I speak for the whole department when I say that. So thank you so much for sitting down for episode 4 of the Can Report.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And that wraps up episode 4 of the Amador Fire Can Report. A huge thank you to Firefighter Hill and Firefighter Hillstead for sharing their insights and experiences as being a volunteer firefighter with Amador Fire. Remember, we're more than just a department. We're your neighbors, your first responders, and your community partners. Stay connected with us on social media for updates, safety tips, and more behind-the-scenes stories. Until next time, stay safe and stay prepared.